The Girl Who Just Wanted to Be Loved is a foster care memoir from Angela Hart. This was released originally in 2016. I read it for the first time in around 2018, 2019, and currently rereading all of Angela Hart's books, I decided to reread it and I couldn't remember much about it. And that doesn't really surprise me, I have to say. Unusually for Angela Hart, it's not very well written, and it's also kind of frustrating because the child she's looking after, I hated all of the way through. And I will discuss what I mean by that with a spoiler warning because I don't want to give away too much. I do recommend it if you've read other foster care memoirs, other books by Angela Hart, and you think it might appeal to you, at least in part. But if you've never read any foster care memoirs, please don't start with this, as it's very atypical. So there will be spoilers in a moment, but very briefly, first of all, Angela and Jonathan are looking after an 8-year-old girl called Keeley, and they know immediately that her behaviour is horrific. Her language is horrific. She swears constantly. And I have to say, credit to the book, they didn't censor any of the swearing. Some foster care memoirs do, and I just feel like, what's the point? You're detailing potentially horrific experiences that the child or children have gone through, and then you censor swear words. Like, come on, there's no need for that. So I'm really pleased that they didn't censor anything, because I feel like if you can't stomach the swear words, you can't really stomach the backgrounds that the children have had, because a lot of the children, of course, have had really horrific, harrowing, detrimental, problematic backgrounds. And this is the case with Keeley. We learn a little bit as the book progresses about what her life was like before she came into care. If I remember rightly, she came into care about 2 or 3 years before when this was set, so not an insignificant amount of time. But it seems like her behaviour just gets worse. And usually when we have a foster care memoir with a child who's got terrible behaviour, we start to see improvements. That's not the case here. So I'm going to go into more detail now with a spoiler warning about various specific things that I didn't like. Well, actually, first of all, one thing I can say that's not a spoiler, in the context of it being badly written, I feel I should explain this because I don't think it's ever fair to say something is badly written without actually explaining it. First of all, there are a lot of grammatical errors, typing errors, perhaps, for example, it was talking about, very briefly referred to, I think, a dessert menu or dessert table, and it was spelled desert, which I assume is a typing error, but it was very early on, as in within the first chapter, and it kind of just snowballed from there. I wouldn't say it's riddled with grammatical errors, because I could read it. If it was riddled with them, I wouldn't have got through it, but enough that I paid attention to it, and it kind of annoyed me. Also, often a point will be made in relation to Keeley, and then Angela will go off on a tangent and start going on and on and on about something from her past experiences, and then it never really comes back full circle, and we just end the chapter and move on, and it just feels rambly and not very well structured. So that's something that's worth bearing in mind. So spoilers from now, I'll discuss also why I didn't enjoy reading it. And there are 2 reasons for that. So spoilers from now. The first reason I didn't enjoy reading it is that I hated Keeley. I hated her as a character. And I do say character because these are based, of course, on true stories, or as we believe they're based on true stories, but heavily fabricated to protect the identity of the children and their family, which is completely acceptable. But reading her story, I hated her. I hated her behaviour. I don't think Angela and Jonathan responded to her in the right way. And it wasn't even so much that they would explain how they responded to her and then commented that they would have done things differently, with hindsight. It was very much the case that it seemed like they believed they responded in the right ways. There's one particular chapter where Keeley is really nasty to Angela's mother, to Thelma, and she gets away with it. And she's given ice cream. She asks for ice cream, and because Keeley was looking for a fight and looking to be told, no, you can't have ice cream, Angela let her have the ice cream. But either way, that's still telling Keeley she will get what she wants, whether she wants the fight or she wants the ice cream. And that was completely unacceptable. And I don't think it was the right thing to do, because Keeley learned nothing. She learned that she can be nasty and still get ice cream or whatever it is that she wants. Now, bearing in mind that there are two other children Angela and Jonathan are looking after, two boys who I think were 13 and 15, if I remember rightly. Does that mean that if they were that cheeky and they were that nasty, and then they asked for ice cream, they'd also get ice cream? I don't believe they would. And I think you need to set an example. And as I said, it's not like they were saying, well, we were at the end of our tether, we couldn't cope anymore, so we just gave in. I kind of understand that. Keeley would be impossible to live with. And yeah, if somebody said, look, I just gave in because I couldn't deal with another argument, I'd understand. But the way it was written in the book, and this is just one example, but there are several other occasions when this happens or something similar happens, there was an explanation where it seemed like their actions were the right thing to do. Well, Keeley was looking for an argument, so we didn't give her one and gave her the ice cream. No, you don't give her the ice cream, but you don't give her the argument. They're not the only two options. You can send her to her room calmly without giving her this fight, without giving her this negative attention. Just ignore the situation. Again, had they said, we did this because it's difficult, I would have been okay with it. But to suggest that that's the right way to respond to that situation, to me, is not acceptable. And there's a lot of that in this book. And the other thing that's really annoying about this is that there's no change, no improvement. This is the only foster care memoir I have ever read where we're in the exact same situation at the beginning as we are at the end with regards to Keeley's behaviour. She doesn't improve ever. There is no improvement. And I'm not saying that as a slight to Jonathan and Angela. I think they did the best they could. Well, as I've said, I don't necessarily agree with how they responded to her, but I don't think that it would have made a difference had she been with another carer. I think she needed specialised treatments, and I don't think the care plan was in her best interest. So this is, of course, a big spoiler, as I'm going to say what happened in the very end, and it is the very end because it was exceptionally rushed. Her father comes back into her life after being away for 2 years. She never even mentioned him before, so this came out of the blue, and her father went through a parenting assessment and she moved back in with him. So, two professional, highly trained carers can't help her, but they're going to let her move back in with her father just because he's a potentially suitable parent, and that's it. End of story. That seems ridiculously irresponsible to me. And honestly, we do have an epilogue where it seems like things worked out best for her. And I'm glad they included that because it left me with a slightly positive feeling about the book at the end. But how did that happen? Did she have therapy? Did she have to get specialist care? There's no information about that. So basically, we have, I don't know, 300 pages or whatever of Keeley misbehaving with nothing working. No insights, no helpful advice, nothing. Her father comes along, he passes the parenting assessment, she moves back in with him. 10 years later, or however many years later it was, she's a much more well behaved, well rounded adult, and end of story. We don't learn anything. There's a little bit of information in this book about attachment disorders, but it never properly looks at symptoms. It doesn't look at treatments or how to handle those situations. So we learn nothing. I don't think it's a good read. It's kind of badly written. Keeley is a really frustrating character. I don't think she was handled properly or her case was handled properly. And if you're looking after a child who's going through something similar, I don't think there's any benefit to reading this because there's no insight. And this is so rare to have this kind of response from a foster care memoir because usually the child will improve. There will be some at least useful advice about their condition or how to best handle a child in that situation or to handle their behaviour. None of it. Absolutely nothing. So unfortunately, I don't recommend it. There are very, very, very few foster care memoirs that I don't recommend. But unfortunately, this is one of them. The Girl Who Just Wanted to Be Loved is not well written. It's a very frustrating read. There's no progression. There's no logic to the direction it took with her care plan. And I can only hope that that's not actually what happened with the child who this is based on. So unfortunately, I didn't enjoy it. And I will probably, well, almost definitely never be reading it again. If you've read every other Angela Hart book and you haven't read it, give it a go, check it off your list, but otherwise, it's not worth it.